A new session of talks aimed at reaching a truce in the trade war between the U.S. and China is over. The lead Chinese negotiator left the U.S. Trade Representative's office after only a couple of hours today, and the U.S. president has tweeted he's in no hurry to sign a trade deal. The dispute started when the U.S. imposed import duties on Chinese goods worth $200 billion, and those duties rose even higher today. Ellen Morrow reports from Washington.
The talks wrapped up here at the office of the U.S. Trade Representative late this morning. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin described them as constructive, and China's Vice Premier reportedly said they went fairly well. But they did not prevent the United States from going forward with tariff hikes on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, raising those tariffs to 25%, reportedly in response to Chinese desires to change parts of the draft agreement. China vowed to retaliate, so a messy backdrop for the talks today. President Trump defended the tariff hikes on Twitter this morning in a series of tweets, in one of them writing, "Talks with China continue in a very congenial manner. There is absolutely no need to rush, as tariffs are now being paid to the United States by China. These massive payments go directly to the Treasury of the United States." But China isn't actually paying anything to the United States. These tariffs will be on Chinese goods coming into the U.S., making those goods more expensive, a cost set to be borne by American consumers. But there is an important caveat. The tariffs only apply to goods shipped from China after the midnight deadline last night, and they only take effect once those goods reach the United States. That leaves a small but an important window of time for negotiators to come to some kind of resolution before the tariffs have a tangible impact on American consumers. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
So is the potential pain for American consumers worth it? Can tariffs be an effective negotiating tactic? Carla Hills served as U.S. Trade Representative from 1989 to 1993, and she joins us now from Washington. Hi, Ambassador Hills. Pleasure to see you again.
Well, it's nice to join you again.
This latest round of talks between China and the U.S. clearly ended without an agreement. Do you think the triggering of the sort of increase in tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese exports will change anything?
Well, I think that both sides need to get an agreement. And so I hope they can put the debate apart. Apparently, there have been some divisions. The Chinese claim that they want to have some changes in the enforcement rules, in other words, not have legislative mandates. And the U.S. says, well, you're reneging. That's backsliding. But that's a debate they should be able to work out.
Why do you have optimism that they'll be able to work it out?
Well, there are two ways in China of having a law. One is to have it passed by the Chinese People's Congress, and that's, I think, what was in the mind of our negotiators. But there's another way, and the Council, the People's Council, can enact regulations that have the effect of law and can be enforced. So there are a lot of ways to be able to get through this debate. And frankly, the tariffs and counter tariffs are hurting both economies and creating a great deal of uncertainty in both bilateral and globally.
Do you think then that they're ineffective as a strategy?
I would have preferred, as you probably know, for the United States to join hands with the European Union, Canada, South Korea, Japan, representing more than 50% of the global GDP, and said to China that you cannot have discrimination. That was something you agreed to when you joined the WTO, the World Trade Organization. You must give us national treatment. And if you won't, we won't do business with you. And I think there it would have been a much more constructive, positive outcome, because China needs to have these markets. It cannot exclude itself from the global economy.
Let me ask you to delve a bit deeper into that. I assume you're referring to the potential for the TPP, which, of course, President Trump didn't want to be a part of. When you talk about China sort of needs to be a part of the global economy, can you expand on that a bit? What do you mean?
I think that if 40% or 50% or 60% of the global economy does not do business with you or puts up restrictions, you're going to have to change your ways. And even though China's the second largest economy, it's very beholden to the markets beyond its borders. So I think that we could have gotten a better deal with more diplomacy rather than tariffs. Tariffs are really not a tool of trade. They cost us more jobs than they ever create, and also hurt sectors where they're imposed. Our farmers are hurting today before the tariffs went on and became more extreme.
Do you think that all the participating countries that you named off and that we know to be members of the sort of current TPP would have been as aligned in placing restrictions on China as you indicate?
Absolutely. The complaints that we basically have are failure to enforce your intellectual property laws, the subsidies that are not notified, that discriminate and pour into state-owned enterprises, the lack of market access, the fact that you put percentage caps so that I can't invest in your country at 100% and keep control of my investment. And these are things that really have plagued all of the countries that I named, and they want it changed and should. And by the way, this is in China's interest. Its economy is slowing down a bit. And if it wants to attract new innovative techniques, it's got to protect the intellectual property laws. If it wants to funnel its capital to the most productive sectors, it's got to do it to the private sector, not to state-owned enterprises. And if it wants to have healthy employment, it wants to have inward investment that provides taxes and job creation. So it's a win-win possibility.
I want to also ask you about the Canadian context, which I know you're familiar with, being that you were such an integral part of negotiating the original NAFTA. Our Prime Minister here today, for the first time, very much explicitly indicated, and I'm paraphrasing, that some of the ramifications in this country, for example, canola exports are being blocked by China. We have 2 Canadians who have been detained. He indicated, specific to the canola case, that it was because Canada is sort of caught between the U.S. and China in their trade dispute. Would you share that view?
Yes, I think that when you have a trade dispute among or between the 2 largest economies, other countries are adversely affected. And keep in mind that Canada is our largest export destination, and we have the most integrated supply chain. Some of the things, the pieces that we buy, in the case of the United States, about half of its imports are intermediate products that make our exports more competitive and more innovative. So yes, I think it's not just the U.S. that's affected by this trade war that's rumbling through the global economy. I think that our trading partners and the global economy is affected.
You know also, of course, that there is a quote-unquote new NAFTA that was agreed to. It has yet to be ratified. There are tariffs that have been placed on this country and retaliatory tariffs in exchange for that, going in the other direction where steel and aluminum are concerned. What would your advice be to the Canadian government? Would you hold out on ratifying the new NAFTA until those tariffs are lifted?
Well, I think Canada's already said to the United States, remove the tariffs before we vote on and put through our legislative process this agreement. Mexico has said the same thing. And by the way, Senator Grassley, who chairs the Senate committee that has to shepherd this agreement through the Senate, has said he won't push for the vote until those tariffs are lifted. So it doesn't make any sense to keep those on. And by the way, they're imposed on the grounds that our imports from our largest export destination, Canada, impact adversely our national security. It doesn't make any sense.
Do you think there is any cause for Canadians to be optimistic that will change? I ask because I know that you obviously have a view on tariffs and many others do as well. We've heard the president unequivocally say multiple times that he views them as a very important tool in negotiating anything to do with trade. Well,
I believe in open markets and the growth that comes to innovation and building bonds with our trading partners. Tariffs are a tool of a managed trade and are very much different from the 70 years that we have benefited, whether under Democratic or Republican administration in trying to create a global atmosphere where there's a win-win for all participants. And so I advocate our global institutions, which include the World Trade Organization, our North American connections, which I think have been hugely benefit for all three governments, and I'd like to keep our markets open.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Ambassador Hills. That's former U.S. Trade Representative Carla Hills from Washington.
Thank you.
And we have been talking a lot about tariffs over the past few months. So how do they work and how do they affect you? We wanted to explain. Take a look. A tariff is essentially a tax. Governments implement them on goods coming in from another country. So let's say an American company buys 100 washing machines from a Chinese company. Each has a price tag of $500. So the total cost is $50,000. At the border, they face a 25% tariff. That means an additional $12,500 is owed. But China doesn't pay that amount. The American importer does. Who collects the cash? U.S. border agents at 328 different ports of entry, and the proceeds go to the U.S. Treasury. The idea is to encourage domestic companies to buy local or perhaps from another country. Often, though, the company just passes on the cost to the consumer by raising the price of that washing machine. In fact, new research suggests President Trump's tariffs increased the cost of washing machines by 12%, or about $86 to $92 more per appliance. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.